everyone. Thanks, Economic Society of Singapore and Singapore Management University for inviting me here. I feel a bit out of place because what I will present is very different from earlier on. We've learned how economics applies in investing, in technology. I'm going to talk about a group of people whom I see as victims of the progress of the rest of society. I jotted this down as I was listening to the presentations. Let me quote from an LSE professor, Richard Titmuss. He was a social policy expert in the 1960s and 70s. He said this in one public lecture. The people that I will be sharing about, they are part of the price we pay to some people bearing part of the cost of other people's progress. The obsolescence of skills, redundancies, they are the socially caused diswelfares, the losses involved in aggregate welfare gains. So, labour market polarization and young workers. What I'll talk through today. First, I'll share an overview of the research project from which I'll share is on in-work poverty among young workers. Three things I'll share: polarity in education, wage and occupation, training inequality, and also work-based time poverty. These are some of the findings from our research so far, and before I conclude with some recommendations. Here's the study overview, which I should look at there. Okay. Right. So with the aim to understand the experiences of young workers in low-income jobs, my study includes 4 surveys and interviews waves, 4 survey and interview waves with workers, occupation-specific ethnographies, and a weekly mobile application. Currently, we're completing the 3rd wave of surveys and interviews. We've also begun doing interviews and focus group discussions with employers, union leaders, and government representatives who are the key stakeholders influencing wages and work conditions. It's been a teamwork, so I must acknowledge my team members first. Today, I'll share findings only from the first 2 waves of survey with workers. Wave 1 survey was conducted from 2020 to 2021 during COVID-19 with 1,905 respondents aged 21 to 38. Wave 1 was conducted about a year later when we were getting out of the pandemic. At sampling, we divided our sample into a target group of lower income and lower educated respondents, and also a comparative number of young adults who are higher income or higher educated. Okay, moving on to the findings. First, let me show you the educational and wage profiles. In many surveys, respondents with ITE and below certification are often underrepresented. So we targeted to find enough of this group and managed to find 12% with ITE certs and 11% who didn't even complete ITE. About 40% of our respondents were low-waged. We followed MOM's definition of low-wage, which is earning at below the 20th percentile of all wages in Singapore. Wage is where you see the polarity. Let me explain the chart first. I constructed this chart by working backwards. We start here at years 12 and 13. Those are the waves 1 and 2 of our surveys. Right? At these time points, we have the wages by different education levels. Then from what respondents reported of their salaries of their first full-time job and the average number of years they have worked, I plot backwards from wave 1 for the average number of years worked for each educational level. So for those with secondary and below education, the starting salary was 1,200. Oops, sorry, I've advanced instead. Here, right here. Then those with IT, 1,400, that's the starting salary. Then Poly, 1,008, and degree holders, 2,005. Right, then I join the dots and you get this picture where the trajectory of the degree holders are clearly one where the wage levels are higher and wage growth steeper. In contrast, there does not appear to be any difference in the trajectories of respondents with and without ITE. The IT cert has brought almost 0 wage increase from starting to wave 1. And clearly, if you project these lines into the future, they will become more divergent. Now, part of the explanation for the wage divergence or non-divergence in the case of the 2 lowest levels of education is occupations. This chart shows the distribution of occupation classes by highest education level, lowest on the left and highest on the right for degree holders. And that last column with the black outline, that's for the overall distribution. The largest proportion of degree holders are in professional jobs. Right? And then among diploma holders, the largest are in associate professional and technical jobs. And then among the ITE graduates and below, some are associate professionals. But notice there's a substantial group who are the service and sales workers. Those are the two that I've outlined now. And also a substantial group who are the plant and machine operators, of which the majority are self-employed platform workers. Maybe they are being managed by the algorithms that are designed by our tech economists, right? Even more noteworthy is that there are young workers, although not many, who are in the lowest job category of cleaners, laborers, and related workers. So there's quite a lot of overlap in the kinds of jobs that ITE and non-ITE graduates hold, and this might explain the lack of wage difference between them. The unequal wage trajectories suggests to us the need to decrease the wage premium of a degree, at the same time that we need to improve the job prospects and wage progression of ITE graduates. This is something that PM Lawrence Wong has also repeatedly talked about, I think once at this policy forum some years ago. One important avenue for improving job prospects and wages is training. So let me next share our findings on training. These are the two research questions we ask. Who is more likely to attend training and who benefits more from training? We answer these questions using data from 1,043 respondents who completed both waves 1 and 2 and have valid wage and employment data. Let me show you first the descriptive snapshot. The table on top of this slide shows the percentages of respondents who participated in training in the past 12 months of each survey. Training rates were much higher in wave 1 during COVID-19 than in wave 2. Then by education, consistent with the international literature, higher educated respondents were more likely to attend training. The disparity in participation rates between degree holders and ITE graduates widened from waves 1 to 2, from 1.5 to 2.8 times. We also found unequal sources of training funding by education level. There are three possible funding sources which are not mutually exclusive: employer funding, government funding, i.e. SkillsFuture funding, and self-funding, right? Because sometimes someone might be funded by SkillsFuture partially and then have to self-fund, co-pay the rest, right? So from the chart, policies, employer sponsorship, that's the darkest blue bar, is the greatest funding source across all education levels, but the percentage is significantly lower for respondents with ITE certification and below, especially compared to degree holders in both waves. So with these descriptive statistics in mind, let us now turn to answering our research questions. For the first research question on who attends training, the dependent variable is a dichotomous variable that equals 1 if the respondent has attended training in the past 12 months in wave 1 and then wave 2. We zoomed in on education level, PMAT status, and years of work as the main determinants controlled for the variables listed on the bottom of this slide. And we also studied employer funding of training as a mediating variable. As shared earlier, more highly educated young workers were more likely to receive training sponsorship from employers. So we study whether the relationship between the main variables and training operates through employer funding. And we find that it does. Higher educated were more likely to complete training mediated by employer funding of training. This finding is shown in this table, which reports the linear probability results on training of the main determinants: education level, PMAT status, and then years of work. Degree holders are the base omitted group, so that the coefficients of lower education levels of ITE and diploma are compared with degree holders. With the significant findings highlighted in yellow and in asterisks, Model 1 shows clearly that ITE respondents are significantly less likely to attend training in Wave 1, and both ITE and diploma holders and below are less likely to attend training in Wave 2. The effects are stronger in Wave 2. Model 2 then shows the mediation effect. When employer funding is added, coefficients of all significant education effects are reduced fully in wave 1 and partially in wave 2. Right? So employer funding mediates the effects of being highly educated on training. So now moving on to the question on who benefits from training. We conducted difference in differences analysis, which is a way to address time-invariant unobservables in the data. And again, we controlled for the same set of variables in the analysis for training participation. In interest of time, let me just tell you the results. We found that training in wave 1 improved wages by 9% and wave 2 wages by 12%. And the finding is driven by two groups of respondents, those who work longer and those with lower education. However, we found no such effects in wave 2. So why does wave 1 training increase wages but not wave 2 training? Scale and composition might be a reason. The height of the columns in this chart shows the percent of respondents who attended training in waves 1 and 2. And the section within each column breaks down the trainees by education level. So by scale, that is the height of the chart, more people attended training in wave 1. And by composition, more ITE graduates or lower educated attended training in wave 1 during COVID. Right? Thus, this finding, right, of the composition of trainees, right, it changed during recessions, and this composition change might have explained why training during recessions increased wages more, right? And this is also found in other studies. Thus, it appears that economic recessions generate a positive effect for more disadvantaged workers in the sense that more people can attend training, especially those that do not usually get sent for training. So to conclude on training, our training analysis shows that lower educated young workers had lower training rates but experienced greater wage growth post-training during COVID. And one possible mechanism is through employers' funding, which biases against lower educated, a bias which might have been offset during COVID due to government supports to employers to send staff for training rather than retrenching them. Thus, learning from the training effects during a pandemic and tapping on the strong training culture in Singapore, the question is how can we encourage employer investments in training of lower educated staff? And for young people in low-wage jobs, another possible barrier to training is time poverty, and this is the next part of my presentation, which explores this concept. Our sample includes wave 1 employees, and again, low wage is defined at the 20th percentile. Defined as having too many things to do but insufficient time to complete them, the time poverty literature is limited and has largely focused on women, single mothers, and in developing contexts. That's because of the amount of time low-resource women need to spend on household chores. So there is a gap in the literature exploring work-based time poverty. And the first thing we did for this time poverty analysis is to conceptualize what work-based time poverty is. We do so using factor analysis of 3 time-based work conditions in Eurofound. Here are the items under each dimension in Eurofound. To make them into time poverty measures, we set cut-offs beyond which we considered the individual to be time poor. For example, long hours per week was set at working more than 48 hours per week. After factor analysis, however, we found a poor model fit using Eurofound's 3 dimensions. Instead, we found a better model fit for 2 dimensions, with working late at night loading together with long hours and working weekends and shifts loading with uncontrollable hours. The second thing we did in our time poverty analysis is we studied the mediating effects of time poverty on the relationship between low wage and psychological well-being using structural equation modeling. This is our so this just shows you, the 2 dimensions. Okay, right. So the second thing we did is to study the mediating effect of time poverty, right? From low wage to time poverty, then work to family conflict, and then finally to the psychological well-being measures, generalized anxiety disorder, and self-efficacy. Here are the results. They show that for low-wage workers, the qualitative dimension of time poverty leads to work-to-family conflict, which then negatively impacts anxiety and self-efficacy. And this is seen in the red path, which is the significant path through non-standard and uncontrollable hours. The path through quantity of hours did not have such an effect. So to conclude on time poverty, right? Time poverty can be measured along two dimensions, one reflecting long and late hours and another reflecting non-standard and uncontrollable hours. But it is the non-standard and uncontrollable hours that characterize low-wage work and adversely affect individuals in low-wage work. Right. So as I bring the three findings together, we see a vicious cycle of being young, low-waged, and time poor. First, being young, all the more they need and have the potential for training to increase skills and education for higher wages and progression. And being young, for those who want to have children, they also need time to build their family and care for young children. Yet working in low-wage jobs tend to put them in qualitative time poverty, which increases work-to-family conflict, which then increases anxiety and decreased self-efficacy, which in turn decrease their time and cognitive bandwidth for training. They can even worsen their functioning at work itself. Right? What I've shared with you is more the quantitative findings. In our qualitative findings and through the interviews, we hear a lot of these stories of trying to balance childcare and work with the inflexible hours, the non-standard hours, which really conflict with their time for their children. So it's a vicious cycle. What do we do about this? From my presentation, you can see that I already assumed that training is part of the solution. But with the challenges faced by low-wage young people in training, what else needs to happen? In my opinion, at the end of the day, we cannot just push training. We cannot just push educational upgrade. Not everybody needs a degree. We will always need workers in bottom-paying jobs. To illustrate with an extreme example, if everybody has a degree, then a degree holder will have to be a cleaner or an F&B worker. How much will we pay that degree holder? This slide shows the educational distribution of 25 to 29-year-olds in 2022. Only 16% have an ITE cert or below. And as the cohort grows older, some of these 16% will get a higher level education, but not all. So there are very few young people with low education, but when they do, the jobs available to them are the low-paying jobs. If we continue to pay so poorly, this group will more and more be disadvantaged and further in their earnings and life chances from the rest. So at the end of the day, improving wages of bottom earners is key. We have to recognize and remunerate better the jobs that PM Wong calls the heart and hands jobs. Second, flexi work is, in my opinion now, is a must. It's no longer an option. If we are pushing continual skills training, want to encourage young people to have children, then our workplaces have to accommodate these necessities in life. Another reality is our aging population, right? Leading to more people needing to provide care for their elderly parents when they become fragile or ill. So caregiving is a stage in life we should expect everyone to go through, which means that our workplaces have to build in our HR norms the flexibility for workers to attend training and provide caregiving for families. For low-wage workers, unfortunately, they are in jobs where flexi work might not be seen as an option, right? Be it flexi place or flexi time. And this should not be the case. The tripartite partners, for example, are working out a retail transformation map where they are building in how to extend flexi time for retail workers, right? And this is an industry where we might expect that maybe flexibility they can't have. I'll just end with this, that some of the buzz around young people issues, for example, on mental health, expectations like of being digital nomads, they apply very differently for lower educated and lower wage young people who can't even imagine that kind of life. Thus, we need a repertoire of interventions to enable young people differently for high and low educated and high and low waged. Thanks.